So I had the idea for this webinar in order to help people with their Buddhism or Intro to World Religions classes on Buddhism for the fall semester, hoping that some students would probably want some information on what's going on with Buddhist responses to COVID-19. And this, a lot of scholars have been working on this, so we're putting it together here in order to give you some of this information and teaching materials for you. So hopefully it will be helpful. So that is the background and the procedure. So I think we can get started. I hope that will last maybe a little over an hour, but I'm trying not to go over that. So each participant will speak for about 7 to 8 minutes. And we're gonna start with Jack Mangtat Cha from the National University of Singapore. And he's going to talk about the COVID-19, the Buddhist responses to COVID-19 in Singapore. So thank you, Jack, for starting us off.
Thanks for to pull up my slides. Yeah. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll begin by thanking Brooke for putting this panel together. My presentation will discuss the recent e-visa celebrations in Singapore. So Buddhists in Singapore, let me see if I move the slide. Okay. So Buddhists in Singapore, which makes up about a third of the population, are the religious majority in the global city-state. Although most Buddhists in Singapore are ethnic Chinese belonging to the Mahayana tradition, Theravada and Vajrayana Buddhist traditions are also present and popularly practiced on the island. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that Vesak, a Buddhist holiday that commemorates the birth, enlightenment, and passing of the Buddha, is a widely celebrated holiday among the Buddhist community in Singapore. In the light of the global COVID-19 pandemic, Buddhists around the world have turned to the internet for their Vesak celebrations. With the circuit breaker or lockdown in place in Singapore from April 7 to June 1st, places of worship were closed and many Singaporean Buddhists had taken to venerating the Buddha online. 2 weeks before the Vesak on May 7, some Buddhists in Singapore created a Buddhist United Facebook page. It looks something like this. To consolidate and publicize online Vesak activities by various Singaporean Buddhist organizations. The bilingual Facebook page, which is a play of words on the Singapore government's SG United slogan, to fight the virus, aims to share information and reach out to the entire Buddhist community in Singapore to celebrate Vesak on the internet. On May 5th, Buddhist United released a pre-recorded Vesak Day message featuring prominent Buddhist monastics in Singapore. The Buddhist leaders urged Singaporean Buddhists to practice the Buddha's teachings at home, participate in online Buddhist activities, and pray for those who have been affected by the pandemic. On Vesak itself, Buddhist United posted a list of 10 activities that Buddhists can do to celebrate the religious holiday. The 10 suggested activities were: first, bathe the baby Buddha; second, short chanting; third, eat vegetarian meals; fourth, light offering; fifth, 5-minute meditation; sixth, enrich knowledge through Dharma sessions; 7, practice generosity through dana; 8, participate in e-Vesak activities; 9, be nice to everyone, especially essential workers; and 10, like and share the Buddhist United page. But the Buddhist United page has proved to be a useful resource for me to track down a wide range of activities for the e-Vesak celebrations. It listed the online programs of Buddhist organizations from various traditions, including the Singapore Buddhist Federation, the National Umbrella Organization for Buddhist Monasteries and Associations, major temples such as Gomeng Sampokasi Monastery, Mangala Vihara, Sakya Tapel Ling, and Wat Ananda, and smaller Buddhist groups such as the Buddhist Fellowship and Oxford Buddhist Vihara. Singapore Buddhist Federation, which had previously produced a series of popular short online videos on frequently asked questions about Buddhism, has been active in using the internet to engage a younger audience. It created a new eVisat Facebook page 2 weeks before Visat to allow online light offerings and donations. On the day of Visat, Singapore Buddhist Federation and its youth group launched a 5-hour online program on Zoom, as we see over here, to celebrate the Buddhist holiday. The celebrations included light offerings and bathing of the baby Buddha ritual led by Venerable Guangping, talks by monastic and lay leaders, as well as the screening of pre-recorded videos. Gomengsan Pokasi Monastery, the largest Buddhist temple in Singapore, was unable to hold its widely attended 3 steps 1 bow ceremony for Visat this year. Therefore, the monastery introduced an online service for Buddhists to make light, flower, and food offerings to the Buddha on its Awareness Place website. Let me see over here. So for $12, devotees could select a dedication message when they check out their e-offerings in the shopping cart. Wat Ananda, a Thai Theravada temple popular among both Thai and Singaporean Buddhists, held a Visat blessing chanting for several hours on Facebook Live that started at 8 a.m. in the morning. The temple prepared the Pali devotional passages with English translation side by side. In recent decades, Taiwanese transnational Buddhist organizations, or mega temples as I call them, such as Foguangshan, Shiji Foundation, and Dharma Drum Mountain, have gained a big following among the Chinese Singaporean community. As I have argued elsewhere, Foguangshan has long been harnessing popular culture and technology to reach out to the IT-savvy younger generation in Taiwan and beyond. Foguangshan Singapore, just like its headquarters in Kaohsiung, has been relying on various social media platforms to propagate the Dharma. The organization held a Dharma service on the evening of Visat using YouTube Live to bathe the baby Buddha and make light offerings. More interestingly, a friend shared with me that Foguangshan members were circulating a website produced by the Foguangshan headquarters, which allows the public to bathe the Buddha online. So let's take a look at this, which is really fascinating. So you have to drag this up to bathe the Buddha. And it says, I vow to stop doing evil deeds, do good deeds. And to my amazement, the website has been visited more than 4 million times worldwide, as we see over here. A number of recent studies have revealed that Buddhist organizations began to rely more heavily on the internet and various social media platforms to engage a younger audience. The global pandemic perhaps has opened up an opportunity, if not necessity, for Buddhist organizations to enter the cyberspace. More research would be needed to ascertain the effectiveness of online religious celebrations within the Buddhist community and across other religious communities in Singapore and elsewhere. Following the end of the circuit breaker on June 1st, places of worship have reopened with a limit of 20 people at a time. However, some Buddhist organizations have decided to remain closed and continue their activities online for the time being. It will probably take a while before Buddhists can return to the temple and practice together in Singapore. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Jack.
And my share screen.
And yeah.
Oops. How should I do that?
I can stop it.
Oh, okay. Thanks for
All right. Thank you for setting us up in your discussion of Singapore. And the next speaker we have is Jeff Wilson from Renison University College, talking about Buddhist responses in North America. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Pardon me, I'm not terribly used to Zoom. There's green, and let's share the PowerPoint. Here it comes. Okay, great. That looks like it's working. We good? Okay. I'll get to the point here. So thank you, everyone. Very interesting stuff, Jack, and I think we'll see some similarities and some differences as well. So first, just in setting up the situation, so I called it North America. Really what I'm looking at is the United States and Canada. So this is inclusive of Hawaii, which is an important thing to note. Now, when we're talking about the USA and Canada, of course, these are not traditionally Buddhist nations, but on the other hand, due to immigration and other factors, literally just about every significant kind of Buddhism that exists in Asia today also exists in some form somewhere in the United States. So it's a huge amount of phenomena. I've been looking at this broadly, but today I'm mostly going to focus on the Japanese-derived forms of Buddhism, just to give us some sort of something that we can grapple with here. So to start with, every temple, actually Japanese or otherwise, in Canada or the United States, every group, everything, all experience disruptions to their normal services and programming. And these disruptions have lasted anywhere from weeks to months. And therefore, at least at times, all North American and Hawaiian Buddhist activity is retreated to private or virtual spaces. So, for example, in mid-March, the Zen Center of Los Angeles declared that all their on-site services and activities are all suspended for 6 months. And there's many other temples that are on a similar timeline there. So, of course, with temples closed, the internet's importance becomes vastly magnified, just like what Jack was signaling there for the Singapore situation. And over the course of the spring and summer, there was sort of a progression that I could observe. So first you had temples making occasional Facebook posts, and then that moved to live streaming of services held by individual monks in front of a, like a webcam or something. And then this moved to virtual communal workshops and meditation sessions. So you had group activities going on. And then eventually now they're starting to produce technologically sophisticated videos that are specifically designed for remote consumption. So there's a sort of a learning progress as they realize longer, oh my gosh, this is going to keep going. We need to, they constantly have to sort of upgrade what they're doing. And what I find is that the primary organizing principle at work with the online Buddhist stuff I see in North America and Hawaii is replacement. So Buddhist communities are just seeking to do their usual activities in most cases, but they're doing them virtually instead of on site. And they want to make as few changes as possible, typically, at least at the beginning. So an example is the New York Buddhist Church, which you can see in the screenshot here. With their building closed in, the epicenter of the worldwide pandemic there in New York City, they couldn't have services, of course. So Reverend Earl Ikeda began broadcasting Sunday services by himself there in the worship hall. And the format is identical to pre-pandemic services. The only difference is there's no other ministers and no lay people. So, but he otherwise acts just like he does normally with no ritual changes or anything. Now, of course, in many cases, actual changes are nonetheless necessary. So just to give you a few examples, Japanese, American, and Canadian Buddhist communities aren't able to gather for the usual midsummer Obon festivities. So some of them are using TikTok and other similar technologies to sort of film and share videos of themselves doing the Obon dances that they would normally be doing at the temples. Other examples, the Houston Zen Center held an online meditation retreat. And when they concluded, the resident priest went around and bowed to photographs of all of the online participants that had been printed out and put in front of the zafus in the meditation hall where they would have been originally. So she's bowing to them sort of virtually in this way. So that was sort of an interesting sort of thing. In New Jersey, rural New Jersey, we find a Buddhist temple where they're doing parking lot services. So people can pull up and watch from their cars. They brought the travel altar out in front of the temple there and are doing the services out in the open air. So these are several different examples of what we see going on. In their activities, few, if any, groups have preached that Buddhism alone could halt the pandemic or prevent individual infection. That's not a common message. Instead, Buddhist temples have become important sources for disseminating information about right hygiene and right distancing and other sorts of things. And I also find that Buddhist concepts and tropes are often used to instruct members on how to deal with the pandemic. So, for example, the most popular liturgical element in Japanese American and Japanese Canadian Buddhism is the golden chain. And here we see it used on the left-hand side. You've got the traditional wording of the golden chain, which is spoken in most services every Sunday. And on the right hand, we have a interpretation, a recent interpretation that's been put up there, which is designed to help people think about how the golden chain applies during these COVID times. So it's an example of taking this liturgy and adapting it.
Hey, Jeff. Sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing your slides advancing. I don't know if
slides are not advancing. They're
okay.
Advancing on my screen, but not apparently on yours.
They're not on this side.
How disappointing. Let me see if I can do anything about that. Do you see them advancing or?
What we see is not the presenter view, but the PowerPoint at like where you edit it. So if you just flip through those slides, we'll see them there.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Thank you for alerting me to that. And I'm sorry, I did see that there were messages flickering. I didn't look at any of them because everything was hidden to me in that particular screen. So I stopped sharing and let me try to share again. And I'm going to grab the PowerPoint and see if
you just click through those slides on the left hand of the screen there, we'll see
that's
them.
what we'll do.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, you see in the second one?
Yep, we are.
Everything's canceled. Yay. Reverend Earl is in the empty worship hall. Good for him. Now they're putting online, these are the old bone services with the dances and everything. So there's that. Here we go. Houston Zen Center. Everybody is often bowed to at the end of the virtual services. Here's the parking lot service. And I will share these with the group afterwards. My apologies. I didn't realize it wasn't working. Here's the golden chain of love with our left hand, the actual liturgy. And on the right hand, we see the COVID interpretations of all this sort of. Given the technical difficulties, I'm going to jump ahead over some of the stuff I wanted to say so that I don't take anybody else's time. I just want to say that, so in Hawaii, people are starting to return. They have very few cases there, unlike in the mainland. So what do we find? Here we go. You can return. There's changes to literally every single aspect of the services. And I've got a nice sort of list there of some of the changes that we see at one of these places, Puna on the Big Island. Here's Makawao. They're doing things such as individual cups of incense for offering rather than people reaching into the communal sort of thing. Or at the Honolulu Diamond Sangha outside of Honolulu, they have these elaborate rules now about how you enter and where you go and everything. Very important, no petting the cat. They specifically noted that on there. So yeah, these are some of the things that are going on there. So one thing I want to note is that if the buildings closed and the services canceled, many temples have floundered to find replacement funding. So this is something that's been a big issue. Those Obon services or the bazaars that they hold in the midsummer, a really significant portion of the total annual operating budget of many of these temples is earned at these singular events. And so without that, that's a real serious problem. And also without weekly services where they get donation envelopes regularly, that's another serious problem that they have to respond to. Because there's still many expenses, and yet now we don't have the income coming in. So we'll see what will happen. The San Francisco Zen Center several months ago said they were projecting $1 million shortfall just for the first few months of the pandemic in California. And so they created an online emergency fundraiser and so on. They actually managed to meet their goals, but because many people are out of work at this time, I expect some temples will eventually have to close because not everybody will be able to reach into deep pockets and deal with this sort of thing. A couple of final notes here, because I don't want to take it too much time. I think there's going to be a generational shift in power that we see as a response to these things, because it's the younger people who have the technological and social media savvy that these various Buddhist groups need in order to get themselves online. And so I find that they're being called upon much more as volunteers. As that happens, naturally, that means there's sort of a greater space taken by their particular concerns, their perspectives, and so on. So just for example, there's general interest in, say, the Buddhist Churches of America and Black Lives Matter, but certainly strongest among the youngest contingent. They're also exactly the same people who are crucial to making sure that there are weekly services and everything. But their views come to take up more space than they used to previously in the overall sort of Buddhist ecosystem. So we'll see a generational shift in power coming out of this as well. The other thing that I also want to notice is that certainly this is a very difficult time, but I think there'll also be some interesting other changes, like the pandemic is not only injurious, is certainly that in many ways to the Buddhist communities, but also they have to work so hard now to recreate community that I think that in some ways we'll see sort of some new patterns that will be possibly productive here, right? The challenge of maintaining Buddhism in a crisis, it induces organizing, it induces creativity, it creates purpose. And so I think that we'll see all sorts of things coming out of it. There was one Zen leader who, for example, who said 6 feet apart, we're closer than ever. So they're trying to find ways to build community these ways. I had a more cohesive presentation actually prepared, but I skipped over the full middle third of it due to the technological problems there. I'll just stop here because I'm sure other people want to jump in as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'm glad we got to see the slides, so no worries about that. The next presenter is Amy, already getting her slides up. Thank you. Amy Paris Langenberg from Eckhart College is going to talk about Lumbini, Nepal, and her work there. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, hi everyone. Just please let me know if my slides aren't advancing. Are they advancing? Cool, okay. Okay, so I'm really focused on this one little pilgrimage town in Nepal, but I'm going to talk about 3 responses. One of them actually I sort of grabbed from the news, and it's more of a kind of example of a type of Buddhist response. So this is Pakchok Rinpoche, who is on retreat apparently in Parping outside of Kathmandu. So he's given a kind of I would say Buddhist response, sort of traditional response, where he's advising people to pray and meditate and dedicate merit. And I'm just going to kind of blow past that, but that's one example I want you to keep in mind of a response in Nepal. Okay, so going to Lumbini. It's the important pilgrimage town where the Buddha was born. This is the temple that marks the Buddha's birthplace. But it's a very small place, actually. It's a rural place, and it has a lot of economic challenges, a lot of health system challenges, infrastructure challenges. So in and around, there aren't, sort of numbers-wise, a bunch of COVID cases in and around Lumbini or in Nepal in general. However, so 2 things. One is even the number of cases that they have already sort of swamping the health resources that they have. In terms of hospital beds and ventilators. And also the main impact has been financial. So because of the pilgrimage and tourism flow has really stopped, a lot of people are having very severe economic issues, which is what a lot of the response is responding to. I'm going to skip past that. Okay, so So as I said, it's a rural area, it's really agricultural, but Lumbini is also home to this big kind of planned area called the Master Plan. And the Maya Devi temple that marks the Buddha's birthplace is inside the Master Plan. It's that big blue circle on the left. And then there are 40 international temples that have been built there that are funded and built by outside Buddhist organizations, not by local organizations for the most part. And these are really, so either by governments from Buddhist countries or by international Buddhist organizations from Europe and Australia and so forth. So these are a couple of examples. If you haven't been to Lumbini, they're very grand. I apologize, actually, by the way, for the quality of the photos there. I kind of grabbed them off of Google, so they're not very good. But you get the idea. These are very grand structures. They're massive. They're monumental. They're absolutely out of step with the local area, which is something that some local Buddhist groups are quite aware of, that there's a major disconnect between the master plan kind of community, if you want to call it that, and what goes on outside of the gates of the master plan. But here are some of the temples. So this is response number 2. So apparently what has happened there, what people are telling me who live there, what's happened there is that the international temples have basically dismissed all of their workers. So they do employ a lot of local people to do the grounds and cleaning and so forth. They've dismissed them, and they essentially have closed their doors. And so people who have sort of depended on that salary, you know, weekly, daily salary, just to, that's, you know, sort of really support their family, all of a sudden are out of a job. Okay, so close their doors, kind of turn their back on the community. I want to mention one exception to that, which is the Chinese temple that you see here. And that is one of the older temples in the master plan area. And the abbot at the Chinese temple has he's been in Lumbini for a long time, and he has a very kind of organic, good connection with the community. And so he has been doing some distribution of resources and masks and so forth. Okay, response number 3. So this is, these are Venerable Meitteya and Venerable Bodhi. Meitteya on the right is a local. He's from Lumbini. He's from a Brahmin family, kind of prominent family in Lumbini. He ordained as a Theravada monk in his, I think, early 20s. And on the left is Venerable Bodhi, who is a Canadian nun, and so the two of them together started an organization called the Lumbini Social Service Foundation, and they've been doing work in the area for about 10 years, and they have built 4 schools. They've done a lot of conservation-related work in the area, environmental-related work, and they are actually attempting to build a hospital in the area. So they're local, engaged Buddhists. A lot of the money is coming from Canada and from contacts that Venerable Bodhi has. She doesn't live in Lumbini, she lives in Canada. So this organization has responded to the food crisis, really the food safety crisis that's happening in Lumbini, by establishing a food bank. So they've distributed a lot of food packets to the local community, local people who are basically coming sort of one by one to pick up these food packets. Okay, so this is the Bodhi Institute. This is built by Lumbini Social Service Foundation. Meitteya lives there. It is a little monastery. There are a group of local boys who are ordained as novices who live there. As you can see, it's not monumental. It's not fancy. They don't have a lot of money. It's under construction. So people are coming to Bodhi because they know that Meitteya is someone local who helps, and they've started giving out these food packets. They contain salt, oil, rice, and also soy protein. I just want to also say, though, that although it seems as if it's these 2 engaged leaders who are kind of leading this, it really is a very kind of grassroots organization. So the help, you know, that is given is kind of from many, many sectors, many people in the community. So for instance, a well-off local farmer donated a lot of rice to the effort. Other people have allowed them to use their tractors to take the food packets out into the villages. So they're very kind of networked in the area. So, oops, it's not letting me go down anymore. Okay, all right, so I just have some images to show you. These are some of the Bodhi monks, and that is Meitteya, and they're putting the packets together. This is a kind of important character in the story. This is Rocky. He is Meitteya's younger brother, And he is kind of the engine behind these efforts. He's very well connected. He's very good at organizing and getting things done. And so he's done a lot of the kind of logistics of distributing all of these food packets. So more images, you can see the food packets on the left, and the Bodhi monks have supplied a lot of the manpower. And they've also been doing some education around masks and hand washing in the community. More images. There's Rocky again. The other man who's not a monk is Mahesh, who's also a local activist. So it's really a kind of network of people who are getting this done. And then these are just some images that I pulled off of Rocky's Instagram, actually. So he, kind of picking up on Jeff's theme about the younger generation and their media savvy. Definitely Rocky is that person. He kind of keeps this story alive on Instagram, and I think that's part of the way that he's raised some funds for this. Local girl. Okay, so this is another side of the story, which I'm not going to have time to really say much about, but it's, these girls are precept nuns who, so Metea and Bodhi have also established a small nunnery called Peace Grove with about 25 girls who are sort of teenagers and early 20s. So the older nuns, and there are 5 of them who started about 10 years ago, have trained as nurses, and they're nurse midwives. And so they actually have also responded to the government call for health workers. And so they're actually working in hospitals and in government facilities now out in the community. So response number 1 was pray and meditate and share your merit, right? Response number 2 was not our problem, we're closing our doors, we're going back to Germany or wherever. Response number 3, I think, is illustrated by this organization, which is critical, quite critical actually, of the response in the large international temples in the master plan, but also critical of that kind of traditional Buddhist response of pray, right, and meditate and create good thoughts. So this is a quote from Rocky. He said this to me when I interviewed him recently. He said, "You cannot close your eyes and join your hands and pray for peace and harmony. You have to open your eyes and hands. You pay millions to make a statue, but nothing for people. The mega temples were a source of employment, but now a source of suffering." Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Yay, thank you for framing those 3 responses. That was really interesting. And I'm sure we'll have some resonances with that going forward. And then the next presenter is Levy McLaughlin from North Carolina State University talking about Japan. Thanks, Levy.
Thank you very much, Brooke, for putting this together. Hello, everyone in Zoom world. Thank you for making time to join us today. I'm just going to be as efficient as possible going through 4 main points. Here is an image of the massive temple Todaiji in Nara, which started to become something of a trending object on Twitter and Facebook and other things from late April onwards, with this cool image of various clergy lined up in front, pledging to pray daily for the quick expiation of COVID-19 and also for the memory for the solace of those who've died. I'm going to talk about four aspects that I think will indeed resonate with the presentations we've heard so far today. First is the impact on Buddhist temples and sort of, you could say, sort of the mainstream Buddhist life in Japan of the pandemic. The second is ritual responses that have emerged from that, looking thereafter to social welfare engagement on the ground. Some of these are ongoing efforts, but have encountered distinct challenges because of the pandemic shutdown. And the fourth is some spillover effects, some unanticipated aspects that have Buddhist inflection or have an effect on Buddhism due to COVID-19. By the way, one thing I should point out about all of this information here is I'm going to make this PowerPoint available. Hope it's okay, Pierce, if you can host it on your site with a link and everything. And the links here are a combination. There's some of them are specific resources for specialists who want to look at religion in contemporary Japan, but most of them are links to readings that are assignable as for classes. And so I had that in mind when I was putting this together. So there was recently a survey undertaken by the Buddhist University, Taisho University in Tokyo, that did a broad-based sort of canvas of temples in Japan that produced predictable yet rather stark results about the shutdown. It's worth pointing out that Japan is now sort of being lauded as a global success story, comparatively speaking, in terms of COVID-19. There's just under 20,000 reported cases, just under 1,000 deaths, which, you know, if you look at global outliers like the United States or the UK, it's very low. But there is a disproportionate, perhaps, impact on the economy, on social life, and certainly on religion. And so Buddhist organizations require in-person meetings to maintain their institutions, to keep their doors open. And so this 88.6% reporting reduced numbers allowed at funerals, 87.8% canceled or delayed services at temples, and also home visits to perform memorial services in front of people's altars and things like that. That had a big impact, and it's still playing out. And so in contrast perhaps to some other places where there's a more coordinated effort from headquarters to provide, for example, tech services or some kind of organized online response, in Japan, all those sorts of initiatives have really fallen down to individual priests. And so there too, we're starting to see a generational divide. And some of the stories are really wrenching in many cases, because they were talking about priests who have to improvise streaming memorials or funerals to the bereaved through their smartphones, for example, because they're not allowed to let people in to see their dead relatives. Things like that. There's also some more developed things happening. Two aspects I would emphasize there. One is the intriguingly ecumenical move on the part of many of these streaming initiatives. And so instead of, for example, specifically offering a sectarian chanting service or meditation, for example, some of the priests are actually taking it upon themselves to expand their offerings to really bridge gaps, and sometimes moving beyond Buddhism as well. The other thing I would point out is that these will not stop when the shutdown is released. We're going to see the sort of an increasing use of this kind of tech by the priests who've made it work via Zoom, Facebook, and a few other platforms as well. Pardon me. Let's see. In terms of ritual offerings, returning to Todaiji in Nara, that perhaps is the most famous example that has happened. So there's this wonderful image there. You can see that they actually opened a portal in this massive temple that's ordinarily left closed to allow the face of Vairochana Buddha, this 15 meters high, incredible, great Buddha. Obviously, it's for tourists to look in as well, I guess, to see it. But really, the purpose is to allow Vairochana to gaze outward in order to cast benevolent gaze over the populace to protect them from the pandemic. And so this is seen as sort of novel, I guess, a novel in the sense of being, broadcast via Twitter and whatnot. But the truth is that what we're seeing here is return to some of the earliest origins of Buddhism's place in Japan. And actually, with this Todaiji was a central part of what was called the Kokubunji system, where they sort of this series of protector temples that enjoyed governmental support. And this was a system that was created of monasteries and convents, one in each province, sponsored by the government, in the aftermath of a pandemic, of a smallpox epidemic that swept through Japan in the 730s, that wiped out about a third of the population, including many wealthy and powerful people. So at that point, reference for the Buddhas is linked to deliverance from calamity. And then that, of course, goes both ways. That calamity, therefore, is also explained as failure to sufficiently perform your duties, including taking refuge in the three treasures. And so Japan is notoriously understood to be a non-religious country, where if you, in survey results, people are asked, are you religious? Something like something percent of people will say no. Nonetheless, there's a great sort of enthusiasm for these these ritual responses on the part of what we call mainstream Buddhism. That is to say, not new religious movements, but groups that can take refuge in the label of, say, being cultural or traditional. And in this regard, I highly recommend an essay by a colleague, Brian Lowe at Princeton, who wrote this wonderful thing for Imminent Frame on that topic. Switching over to on the ground stuff, this is often stuff that does not get widespread attention. But nonetheless, it's Buddhist activists who are very active on the ground, caring for those who are marginalized and forgotten by mainstream society. And you could tell an alternate history of COVID-19 in Japan from the perspective of these activists. That would be a very, very different picture from what you're hearing in the news media. I'll give you two examples that are really, really notable. One is a Pure Land priest named Yoshimizu, who runs a temple in Asakusa, which is a pretty rough neighborhood in Tokyo, caring for the homeless. And also increasingly for migrant communities, specifically Vietnamese, who comprise the largest number of migrants to Japan. And the fact that restaurants have been shutting down, all kinds of hotels, et cetera, shutting down because of COVID-19, a lot of the most precarious people have been forced out of their accommodation, their jobs and stuff like that. And he has been stepping up in a big way. The Asahi link there in this is an English language article, which gets into some of that. The Facebook page is in Japanese, nonetheless, there's ways to connect to it. And also, for what it's worth, I'm writing a follow-up article on these issues that will provide a lot of information in English. And there he is providing aid here. The other is an ongoing effort called the Rinsho Kyoshi, or the Interfaith Chaplaincy Training Initiative. This came about after the 3/11 disasters in 2011 in Northeast Japan. This has been training religious professionals to serve in clinical settings, to essentially create chaplaincy as a legitimate career track, which really, apart from the prison system, has not really existed in any big way in Japan. But COVID-19 has presented them with really distinct challenges. Like, how do you mobilize volunteers when everyone is supposed to practice what's called in Japanese jishuku, or self-restraint? How do you address new housing challenges as businesses close? For example, one of the distinct things is across urban Japan, there are these businesses called comic book cafes, or manga kisaten, where a lot of homeless people stay because they're cheaper than staying in a hotel and it's better than sleeping on the street. They were closed down because of the pandemic, and so that actually increased the homeless population, especially among younger people. So there's some new challenges there. How do you connect with migrant populations, bridging language divides and things like that? And how can you continue to serve during a medical emergency if chaplaincy is not seen as part of the essential worker framework? And it's not in Japan. So these are issues that a lot of folks have been facing right now. Just to round out, two things I want to point out that are not really on the map in terms of, say, temple Buddhism, but are nonetheless, I think, relevant to discussions of Buddhism and COVID-19 in Japan. One is to do with politics. So the national government in Japan, it comprises two parties. It's a coalition. The major party is called the LDP, or the Liberal Democratic Party, which is conservative, largely linked to Shinto organizations and the ethics training groups and a few Buddhist groups as well. Its junior partner is called Komeito, sometimes called the Clean Government Party. This is founded by Soka Gakkai, which I think many people who study Buddhism will know about. It's a lay Buddhist organization, and it's Japan's most potent vote-gathering bloc. But Soka Gakkai has been shut down since mid-February. They completely shut down all of their in-person meetings, all of their broadcasts, everything like that. So people haven't been meeting, and also they're officially shut down till the middle of July and possibly into August, which is really long. So they started before and they're finishing after any other governmental organizations in Japan, largely due to the stigma that is attached to them. The LDP wants to hold a snap election, and they want to go to the polls. And ordinarily, the Soka Gakkai members would go out in the street and start gathering votes. They're unable to do so. And this is probably an attempt on the part of the LDP to push Komeito out of the coalition, or at least try to marginalize its presence. And so what we're seeing here is directly as a result of COVID-19, the possible minimizing of Buddhist activists' presence in national politics in Japan. That's one thing. The other thing I would add is completely different, but one of the striking sort of phenomena that's been rising in Japan is this invocation of one of the monsters from Japan's mythological bestiary called the Amabie. It's this fantastic creature. It's sort of like a mermaidy thing. It's got scales, has 3 legs usually, sometimes has as many as 9 legs. It's got long, long, beautiful hair, a beak. It's a fun thing. It started, like most monsters in Japan, as terrible and sort of scary, and it's becoming incredibly cute. As you can see here, there's a bento, it's a lunchbox being made with seaweed and stuff. So it's become this sort of like a repertoire that many people have turned to. So it's not technically Buddhist, you might say, but nonetheless, it's part of the transhuman, the spirit world. And the temples have traditionally been places where people have just, sought access to these forces. So popular is this figure that it's been used as the mascot by the health ministry. You can see there the Stop COVID thing. That's actually the government has used the image to encourage people to carry out proper measures. And actually Dentsu, the advertising firm, filed a patent to copyright Amabie, the name, and actually had to withdraw it because so many people were mad. I'm going to leave it off with that. It's a slightly lighthearted take on things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Levy. All right, so we're gonna move on to Dagana Dorr from UC Santa Barbara. Thank you. Talking about, mainland China. Can you unmute?
Yes, unmute myself. Yes. Can everybody see my slides just fine?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I would just like to thank everybody on this panel for this wonderful opportunity, and it's such a pleasure to be, sharing these findings amongst you guys. So I started collecting stuff about responses to COVID-19 in Buddhist communities in contemporary mainland China since the pandemic sort of began in Wuhan, in the Hubei province in China. And slowly I'm thinking about maybe sharing some of these materials with the students of this Zen Buddhism class that I'm teaching right now. So telling them about sort of how Buddhists in Chan communities and also Zen communities in Japan have been responding to this pandemic. But also I was really inspired, right, by a lot of the writings that many of you have done. So I was thinking about maybe sharing some of my collections, right, and maybe contributing to this conversation. So the sources that I have been using are mostly from websites, WeChat posts, Weibo posts. Weibo is kind of like the Chinese Twitter, and different applications, right, dedicated to Buddhist studies for lay people. Then the results, of course, are extremely preliminary, and they're not meant to be exhaustive at all. And I will definitely continue to trace new developments and hopefully share with you guys in a form of an article soon. So these are the things I'll be talking about quite briefly. First of all, government regulations on Buddhist sites and activities and practices in response to COVID-19, and also Buddhist responses to these regulations, and of course the pandemic, right, in these different forms. So first of all, how has the government been regulating Buddhist practices, right, in response to COVID-19? So the gist is basically summarized, right, in this document issued by the Buddhist Association of China. It's called the Guidance on Halting-Related Activities During the Epidemic. It was issued on January 29th of this year. So there's 4 major things. So temporary closure to the public. And all of these things are encouraged, if not enforced. So the specific carrying out of these policies are not very clear at the moment. So temporary closure to the public, and that means complete closure to the public. However, monastic residences who live in the monasteries on a regular basis can stay there, but they're encouraged to focus on self-cultivation rather than reaching out to the public so much. Social distancing, right? So all group religious activities must stop. Avoiding unnecessary travel. So field trips and temple visits are heavily discouraged. And also this kind of encouragement of self-cultivation, right? So monastics are supposed to sort of stay in the monasteries, their home monasteries, and train their bodies and minds and be diligent in their trainings. So then the Buddhist responses, right, to these regulations are more or less sort of in accordance, right, to these suggestions or guidance. There's a lot of temples across the country have gone under lockdown almost all of the temples in the Hubei province, definitely. And there was daily kind of temperature checks and daily kind of tally reports of health conditions and regular kind of cleaning of various parts of the monasteries. There's also WeChat groups created where monastics, right, are supposed to report about their whereabouts and if they have read these kind of newest regulations or guidances, right? And there are charts compiled by monasteries about sort of the daily temperatures, right, of all of their residences. And monks who are returning back to their home monasteries or from trips from different parts of the country or, you know, different parts of the world are supposed to go under quarantine, right? They're closely monitored as well. So there's also this creation of online platforms for virtual practice and study for both monastics and the laity. So for example, there's another document issued by the Buddhist Association of China, a guidance on continued learning for Buddhist studies colleges during the epidemic. So even if a Buddhist college is under lockdown, monastics are still encouraged to continue their learning, right, through, let's say, online platforms and Zoom, right, Zoom courses, or even through applications outside of the monastic curriculum, right? For example, through the Xuexi Qiangguo app, right? So this is an application dedicated to learning Xi Jinping thoughts, for example. And also websites like Coursera and Education X, etc. There's also an emphasis, right, in these kinds of documents on patriotic education, life education, ideological education, moral education, psychological health, right? This is a direct translation of these terms. And there's also kind of this encouragement for monasteries to explore potentials for alternative platform for education, right? So using live streaming, Zoom, and all kinds of different approaches. So this is an example of a nunnery, right, in the Wuchang area in the Hubei province, doing sort of online learning. And you also have these kinds of apps, right? This is a Foxuan app you can download where you can actually watch like streamings of services and also teachings. Of course, right, there's this kind of show of patriotism in many monasteries around the country, these kind of raising of the national flag ceremonies as well. There's considerable online outreach to the laity, actually, in terms of virtual teachings, virtual ritual assistance, and things like online sutra copying, right? So you have applications like this where you can basically book virtual merit-making offerings, right? For example, you know, during this pandemic, there was considerable death happening and also sickness in the family. So a lot of people can't really go to the monasteries, right, to create a plaque or a tablet for their family members, for their deceased family members. So they can actually do this, right, through these applications. And then they would just make the offerings, right, to the monasteries, and then the monasteries will set up the actual plaque or the actual offerings, right, in the monastery. So it's kind of like virtual, but also like an indirect service. In addition to that, right, so this is an example of a temple in Shanghai, right? You can actually scan the code to follow their WeChat account, and then you can make the offering through that account, and they will light one of these lamps for you in the 3D world, I guess. And I also found the same Buddha bathing sites, right, that Jack did. So, for example, you can also do these. So for the Vesak this year, for the Buddhist birthday this year, a lot of people really can't really visit the temple, right? So this became an alternative, and a lot of the majority of these 4 million people, right, who participated in this virtual ritual were from this region, right, including mainland China. And the same site also offers, you know, online sutra chanting, right? So if you just click on the scroll, right, you can actually see the Heart Sutra. There's also websites dedicated to sutra copying from the computer. So instead of writing things out, you can actually type out the characters. There was a lot of donations made to the communities in need through Buddhist communities in mainland China. So as of March 25th of this year, Buddhist community in the Hubei province alone have donated more than $3 million to the front line. So this is in forms of cash, of course, but also goods, masks, and all kinds of different resources, just vegetables and fruits even. And much more, right, counting Buddhist communities from all over the country, as well as donations coming in from different communities abroad. There was also alternative ways to raise money and to be self-sustaining. For example, through monastic culture. Okay. So let me just show you. So many of these government regulations also encourage the practice, or going back to the practice of Chan monastic agriculture, right? So you suddenly see a lot of monks going to the fields and cultivating. And one monastery in Wuhan, actually, right, the Lingquan monastery, grew so much vegetables and fruits, they were able to donate all of these to the local monasteries and communities. And it got so popular at this post on Weibo that they ran out of vegetables to give out. So they posted this really interesting image here. There was also promotion and use of Chinese traditional medicine for COVID-19 treatment and prevention in the form of herbal medicine and qigong, or physical exercise. So the Taoshan Baoji Temple, for example, they had nuns and different students of traditional Chinese medicine making these kind of medicine packets to send to the front line. And two of them even volunteered, right, to go to the front line in Wuhan to help the medical workers there. You also have a lot of videos like this featuring monastics kind of teaching people who are quarantined at home, right, to do physical exercise to kind of boost their immune system. And there's also the sharing of personal experiences, right, coming from the perspectives of monastics. So Venerable Quanping, for example, have written a pandemic diary, right, recording her experiences through the pandemic as a monastic, as a nun, right, in fact, in the Hubei area, which is really interesting to read. And of course, there's also a lot of posts, right, dedicated to understanding the virus from a Buddhist doctrinal point of view, and also this kind of trend of promoting vegetarianism, right, through this pandemic. So for example, Venerable Benxing of the Fujian area have written a lot of stuff on this. So he kind of urges Buddhists in the post-COVID-19 era to reflect on karma, right, and our relationship with nature, especially with the animal world. So he urges all Buddhists to protect life and care for minds, take up social responsibility to strengthen the Buddhist community. But also there's a kind of patriotism, right, in his posts: love our country and love our religion, taking up responsibility and the affairs of the world, enhancing the tradition of Buddhist agriculture. Here you see this kind of return to Chan monastic agriculture, academic research and community outreach, but also cooperation with government bodies of all levels in serving the public to get through this epidemic. So this is basically what I have at the moment. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about, but I'll just stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I am the last participant, and so if anyone has any comments so far or questions, you can put them into the chat. Just click on chat and then to everyone, and then we'll talk about those as soon as I'm done. Okay, so I will share my screen now. And so I am Brooke Shednick, and I'm from Rhodes College. And so I'm talking about Thailand and the Thai Buddhist responses, because that's where I do my research. But I'm thinking about it also from the idea of like that, what are the kind of adaptations that Thai Buddhists are making to their kind of normal Buddhist lives in Thailand. Obviously, I am not there like everyone I'm doing some online research, combination of finding Thai articles online from the media and talking to monks and lay people that I know and looking at Facebook pages, and some of the pictures are from media and some of it is from monks that I know. So you can see that even here we have like kind of trying to keep the temple going with rituals and blessings that are done just with masks. And so the three main things I'm going to talk about for these adaptations are within the temple space, and then like some other people have talked about, and the monks' actions, and then lastly, just short on the ways that they're reaching out virtually, the ways that monks are reaching out virtually. So first is just basically cleaning the temple is what I saw a lot of in like March before the like right when quarantine was happening, the lockdown was beginning in Thailand. A lot of the monks were showing how they were preparing the temple for themselves to be in quarantine in the temple. Here in this one picture, you can see the monk cleaning the Prabhupada Sihing image of Wat Prasing, the very famous image in Chiang Mai. So they were kind of disinfecting everything, getting ready for themselves, but also for lay people when they eventually did come to the temple. And that was especially during Songkran, in the April 13, 14, 15 New Year's holiday. There was not the public celebration as normal, but people were going to make merit at the temple. So what one temple did, as you can see here, is that they had the merit making offerings take place outside, which normally they would be within a temple hall, so this is safer, and they have the plastic barriers here, of course. And then another temple decided for Songkran to set up a little tent that you would walk through, and you can see that it has a mister spray here, and it's spraying out some disinfectant. You can see that's what it called it, a disinfectant in Thai. So yeah, I don't know how great that is in terms of like if you had skin allergies or something, but this is what this temple did anyway to purify the people when they came in. And then during Songkran, the temperature checks were happening at the temple. So I don't know the extent to which this is happening more universally among temples or at different time periods as well, but this is what was happening for Songkran. And there's also this video that I'm not going to show because it's just like 2 minutes, but you could show it to your class. It's kind of fun. And it's been shared so many times on Facebook among Thai Buddhists that this, normally, of course, merit making happens very closely. And during the alms round, you get put directly into the bowl. And so in this case, this lay person is like throwing the bags of food into the alms bowl, and the guy, is able to catch it. And then he throws it to his attendant and he catches it. And it's like fun. I don't think everybody's doing it this way, but it's like Thai people like to have fun. Sanuk is a value of Thailand, so this is like obviously not making light of the crisis, but this is a way to kind of have fun at the same time. So the other thing, so moving on like past from like the temple space and like normal rituals, monks have been helping out the community a lot. The kind of like social engaged Buddhism we've seen from some of the other presentations. So some monks have been helping make masks. This was early on. You can see they're not really socially distanced here, but they are using some of the robes that they would normally wear and creating masks out of them in order to hand them out at temples for people to wear when they come. And another mask that I thought was really fun was a mask that was made and has a yantra on it. You can see here the protective symbol that you could buy for 59 baht, which is like $2 if you call and get it delivered. And one temple was doing this with some magic monk as the abbot, and they kind of blessed it just like an amulet. They use the same kind of words to make sacred, bluk-sek, which means like making it sacred, just like an amulet, like a batch of amulets. They would use that word to bless all the amulets to make them sacred. The same thing they were doing with these masks. So now the mask is like a kind of protective device, just like an amulet or a tattoo would be. So in addition to the physical protection, the spiritual protection is there as well. And so monks are helping the community by giving food, which was really interesting. When I taught a Thai Buddhism class to my students, they were, over the summer, they were very confused about why monks were handing out food to the lay people. Shouldn't the lay people be doing that? But the monks were actually calling out on Facebook, the monks that I know, asking for donations for people who still had some money. And then the monks were going out, buying the ingredients, cooking. They said there was no problem cooking. Nobody minded that they were cooking. Obviously, when they, typically in normal situations, they would not be doing that. And then giving out the food to those who needed it. And we can see that when monks also, this was a video that was taken of a monk who had gone on his alms food collection round and then took all of his food and put it into the free cabinet that's available for anybody who needs food. So it's just like a kind of redistribution is what the monks are acting as mediators between those who are able to give and those who need it. And that's the same thing that happened at this temple. This temple is in central Thailand. They are hoping to give out a meal every day to every villager. So they have thousands of people on this line, and they give out one meal one boxed lunch per day, so they can make sure that everybody at least has one meal per day. And if you don't have, food available to you in Thailand, things are bad, because this is a place that has an abundance of cheap food. So a lot of economic hardship happening here, and this temple is able to generate so many donations to give out this amount of food every day. And the first female monk, a bhikkhuni of Thailand, Dhammananda Bhikkhuni, is also wrote an article about her experience of giving back to her community. And you can see the long lines here, and that we're giving out rice. They're giving out more like food that you would cook at home, like vegetables and rice for cooking, and other items. They're just giving out as much as they can. And her article's in Thai, but she goes through many things that she's been doing for her community. And one thing that I thought would be interesting to bring up is in this Buddhist society that there are monks who had to come back from India, especially, and they were wondering in this article what's going to happen to the monks when they quarantine, because it's not really able for them to stay in the temples. It's not really safe there. And so they were thinking about putting them up in hotels, but then what's going to happen to the monks in the hotels, especially if they're arriving in Bangkok, and then the hotel is maybe in downtown Bangkok. And the articles was very concerned about them experiencing some worldliness, some seedy nightlife that they might not be used to, and how would they deal with that? So it's brought up that issue that I think normally you wouldn't think about. And lastly, some of the monks that I work with in the Monk Chat program in Chiang Mai have been reaching out virtually. They have these events online, like almost every day you can tune in to some meditation session to meditate with the monks and also receive instruction. And then also they do a Q&A monk chat online that you type in your question, and they have a panel of monks to answer for you. They also had interviews with scholars. I was interviewed by them. It was very fun. And so they're reaching a lot more people this way, actually, than the tourists that would just come to their temple to participate in these events, because thousands of people are signing up to watch these events. So I think that they would actually probably continue to do it this way, in addition to the physical, when tourism returns to Thailand. So in summary, the adaptations were reaching out virtually to serve. They have it in Thai as well, with the Q&A and meditation online. And then the temple space has been, monks are kind of acting as hosts, cleaning and disinfecting, making sure, we saw the kind of maps of before about how to move through the space, and facilitating safe merit making. And the monks themselves, their actions, should they be in hotels? Should they, what should happen during quarantine is kind of a topic that is come up from this. But mostly the monks are acting within the framework of socially engaged Buddhism and act as redistributors of the economy of merit. Okay, so that is it from me. And we are all ready for the Q&A that Pierce is going to lead, if anyone has anything they want to put into the chat to ask us.
So far, it's a very easy Q&A for me to moderate. We don't have any questions yet. So maybe while some of you are typing your questions, I'll just say that, this is just a fabulous panel, and thank you so much to Brooke for putting it together. I had nothing to do with the organization of it, but quickly put myself forward to host a recording of this panel on the Jivaka website, and would like to create a repository of pedagogical materials over there, including recordings of this webinar, as well as everybody's PowerPoints, as well as links and other material. And what I'm hoping is that a lot of the audience here will also have things to contribute, and it becomes sort of a collective project or a larger collaboration. So just would like to invite anybody who has any kind of materials to contribute to a repository like that to reach out to me by email. And I'll be getting all of this material from today's webinar up there as soon as possible. So we do have some questions starting to roll in, and maybe maybe we can just answer them as they come. So you want to start off with the question there for Jeff? Jeff, are you with us? There's something weird going on your screen.
Okay, I'm not sure. Yes, isn't that interesting? I continue to have technical issues.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're here. Yeah.
There
So
it goes.
there is
My
a
apologies for all of that error, but I'm in almost constant web meetings, and yet this is my very first time using Zoom. It just isn't a technology that we use locally. So I think we all experienced my learning curve with my deep apologies for all that. So I do see a question from Katie Devaney. Is that the one you're referring to, Pierce?
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. Question kind of for Jeff, but also for others. What have you seen succeed and not as meditation communities transition online? Oh, that's really good. Okay, so, and it looks like this is for others as well, so I'll just start there since I'm named. Katie, I think it's quite early for us to be able to talk in terms of success because we don't have a lot of long-term data. In the short term, especially because you're talking about meditation communities, what have I seen that has succeeded and has not succeeded? So
I'm sorry. She has a second comment down below that just specifies that she's from the San Francisco Dharma Collective, and so that she's interested in models. So maybe it's, I don't know if that helps you to address.
Oh, thank you. I see that now. Thank you. Yeah, I had to scroll down in the chat bar there to see that further. Okay. Lovely to hear that you're successfully hosting some guided meditations, Katie. Yeah, guided meditations actually in particular, I think, are well suited for the virtual environment because you have all these people who are all apart from one another and really all they can get is visuals and audio, right? So speaking to them and telling them, sort of leading through meditations, I think works fairly well. There's many things that are lost in this. For example, the physicality of seated meditation practice is very important, yet it's lost here. So just for example, I saw that we had Josho Pat Phelan on as a guest somewhere in there. And when sitting in her Zendo there outside of Chapel Hill, one would naturally expect her to come around and adjust your posture and so on in ways that are just as important as anything that the mind, quote unquote, is doing there. So that sort of thing is lost. Another thing to note is that it's interesting how guided meditation in general is often breath focused. And we're having a very fraught moment here for breathing, right? Both in terms of the pandemic, affects people's respiratory functioning. And on the other hand, in North America, at least, there's all this concern about Black Lives Matter emerging from the George Floyd, I can't breathe, suffocation, assassination essentially by the police services there. So breath and breath meditation take on all sorts of different meanings in this exact historical moment that then without people having the ability to gather together, I think it really makes it even more fraught. So something to think about there. Yeah, in terms of success, I have seen meditation retreats done online, carried out successfully by a number of different communities. Zen communities in particular, also some Theravada or Theravada-derived mindfulness communities have done this quite well. There's also a lot of ritual services that just don't translate very well virtually at all. I wonder what others are also seeing.
Does anybody else want to address that question?
Yeah, I could talk a lot. I'm going to mute so others can jump in here.
So I'll if nobody wants to jump in, I'll add in. I'll move to the second question. This is from Kin, who says thanks to everybody for the presentations, and he's wondering what kind of Buddhist metaphors. What are some Buddhist metaphors that are used in the discourse on COVID? And points out that both the U.S. government as well as the Chinese government are using the wartime metaphors. And so what are Buddhists using as foundational metaphors to describe the pandemic and the virus? I think it's a question for everybody.
Maybe I can oh, sorry, please go ahead. All right. I can maybe try to answer this. I definitely agree, right? I think this is a really great question because you've insightfully pointed out that there's this kind of wartime mode and wartime emergency metaphor used, right? The 战时机制. I think that's really repeated here in many sources that I see. For example, the pandemic is often described as a war or some kind of battle, right? And then victories, for example, when the cases are somewhat suppressed, right? That's expressed as some kind of victory. So 胜利, right? That's also a military kind of related term. And those who have unfortunately passed on, right, from the virus-related infections are sometimes called 烈士, or these kind of, you know, how would you translate that? Like sacrifice soldiers, right, or something like that. And one other really interesting thing that I saw was the use of 庚子 to describe this pandemic. So 庚子it's a term for the specific lunar cycle or year, right? And it's often a year that is historically associated with natural disasters or political upheavals in the past. So a lot of sources, especially when Buddhists talk about the pandemic, right, they often kind of recall this, they often remind people, right, that this is another Gengzi year in these kind of cycles, meaning that this year it's meant to be bad in a way, which is really interesting. And again, right, there's a lot of kind of opinions talking about the pandemic as a national matter, right? Defeating the virus or suppressing the cases is a matter of national concern, national security. That's also expressed there. But I've been sort of looking into, because my own research is more on early 20th century Buddhism, right? So I'm more sort of familiar with that period. So I see a lot of kind of repetitions of these kinds of patterns, right, from earlier periods. So during the SARS pandemic, right, around 10 years ago, these kinds of mobilizations, right, on part of the Buddhists were very similar. And during the Manchurian plague, right, at the turn of the 20th century, you see very kind of similar approaches to of the Buddhist community in China to kind of help the community and also to rationalize or to understand the virus. So you see kind of similar discourses repeating in 2020. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I can bring up some other, they're not all warlike, which is intriguing. There's this enormous repertoire. This is exactly what you're talking about. This is the pandemic it's a palimpsest. It rips past all these layers to the previous examples of trauma and calamity. I wrote an article, it came out a couple months ago, on Buddhist response, Japanese religious responses generally. And one of the people I interviewed via social media is a Shingon priest, and she said that a lot of people have been turning to this old aphorism, and in Japanese, it's called a kotowaza in Japanese, nodo moto to sugireba atsusa mo samasa mo higan made fukusubo ni kaerazu, which basically means it's that once the drink has passed the throat, memory of its heat or cold will not return until you reach the furthest shore, enlightenment after death. And so this is a Buddhist term, right? But it's a remonstration. It's a somewhat gentle remonstration for people to not linger on wrongs that they're feeling slighted. It's a way to sort of survive during shutdown. How to survive if you've been forced to stay home, and so required to actually put up with people you wouldn't otherwise put up with, and so there is this macro level nationalist warlike metaphor, which is actually not so prominent in Japan as far as I've seen, but there's also a broad range of Buddhist possibilities for basically moral suasion, right? And it seems to be happening right now.
Jeff, do you want to jump in a little bit? It seems like you skipped over the part of your presentation that would have answered a couple of these questions, or do you want to jump in either on the metaphors and or on the mantras and dharani that Bill was asking about?
Absolutely can, but I'm also mindful that some other folks haven't had a chance to weigh in on this particular question, so I'll wait a moment to see whether somebody else wanted to jump in front of me there. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody is feeling that I'm taking up too much space. So let me see here. So basically what I cut out that I think, or part of what I cut out that relates to this is the way in which I've seen two sort of phenomena. One, so I'm talking about like sort of rhetorical discussion during this time period among in the online or print materials that I've seen in American and Canadian Buddhism. So on the one hand, there's been use of Buddhism and Buddhist ideas, Buddhist tropes to teach the Buddhist community about how to deal with the pandemic, right? So there's a lot of resorting to ideas like a Eightfold Noble Path, things like right action and so on, or to the, in the Mahayana context, often to the paramitas. It's like patience and morality and generosity and these sort of things. Talking about how these are the things that are necessary and for the public health and so on. So basically, be a good Buddhist and wear your mask. Those sort of things, right? Then on the other hand, the opposite relationship is also going on, where this is basically universal. Every Buddhist group that I look at is using the pandemic as sort of fodder or material to illustrate Buddhism in their Dharma talks and their writings and this sort of thing. So someone in the chat already mentioned impermanence. Yeah, that's the big number one. So impermanence and suffering are the two concepts I see in basically literally every Buddhist group across all traditions, language groups, and so on. They all are using this to illustrate pre-existing Buddhist concepts. To say, and there's usually a kind of so maybe you thought we were just talking about this, but no, we were really serious kind of attitude about all this. So it's always like, we're sorry you're suffering. Remember how we've just spent the last 40 years telling you that your life is full of suffering and getting attached to things, not being willing to change. Like, this is what it was all about. It's kind of an attitude I see it in many, many cases. So there's sort of there's a sort of a core of monastic primarily population that has been sort of trying to get these sort of ideas out there forever, and then there's this vast audience that have been exposed to these ideas, but have not really been forced to deal with impermanence and suffering in the same sort of way. So it's been very interesting to see those sort of things used. Very quickly, because there was questions about metaphors. So the war metaphors out there a lot, but what I often see is in the Japanese, North American, Hawaiian communities, at least the discussion of mappo, the idea that we're in the declining times anyways, so what did you expect? Of course we're going to have Donald Trump and police violence and epidemics and everything else. Again, there's kind of this sense that, we've been saying this. Why, this isn't new. But it's now re-energized, I guess, because it's kind of hard to ignore just how bad things are.
I heard something from my contacts in Lumbini on that, which is kind of interesting, which is that one of the things that COVID is generating in the community is a kind of philosophical conversation about the presence of the goddess. And Maya Devi is actually really locally, they sort of interact with her really as a goddess for the kinds of things that goddesses in South Asia typically are involved with. So protection, crops, health of the family, fertility, things like that. So you will often at the Maya Devi temple, you'll often see local women going and worshiping in a very not international Buddhist flavor, right? So sort of using, offering flowers and scent and oil and things like that. But so anyway, one of the things that I was told is that a lot of the sort of the mothers and the grandmothers are saying to their, young teenage and young adult children and grandchildren who are really aspiring to kind of the modern world, we told you, right? The goddess is present. The goddess is angry. It's this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing, but it is really, it's really strong. And that's what we've been trying to tell you. Like, you have to respect these unseen forces, and in particular the goddess. So it's not really a Buddhist response and if by a kind of certain definition of Buddhism, but it's definitely a local Lumbini response that's happening. And if you have a more expansive understanding of what's incorporated under the umbrella of Buddhism, and you include the goddess kind of dimensions of Maya Devi, it's definitely Buddhist.
Great. Yeah. All right. So the final comments aren't a question. So I guess would throw in a question of my own just to sort of like as a wrap up. If we're teaching undergraduates in an intro to Buddhism class, and this is going to be a topic that we're going to take on, I'm wondering if some of you can reflect on what stands out to you as being a specifically like a distinctive Buddhist response to COVID that is different than what we might find in other religious traditions or new religious movements within the same culture or the same place. So I'm not necessarily thinking in terms of content, like which Buddha you're praying to or whatever, but in terms of more larger structural or thematic kinds of observations that you all would draw students' attention to. And maybe we can just kind of like use that as a little final wrap-up question. And yeah, whoever wants to say something, please.
I guess I can go. This is a very kind of personal observation, but I kind of felt that sort of living in the United States, right, and then accessing media content from the U.S. but also Canada. That's where my parents live, and also right, kind of accessing things from China and different parts of East Asia. So this is sort of what I noticed is that Buddha's responses to COVID-19, especially right in the East Asian context, seems to be not so based on, not so concerned about explaining or focusing on the origin, right, of the virus, but rather on sort of how do we treat it, right? How do we help people? How do we kind of prevent it from further spreading? Because I think the concern for origin is sort of can be easily internalized, right, in Buddhist teaching, right? So it's easy to kind of explain how the virus happens through the doctrine of karma, right, and through kind of this idea of collective karmic deeds, right, that led to these kinds of problems. Or you see similar kind of explanations for other natural disasters and climate change, right, and war and things like that. So what I don't see is, for example, pointing fingers or placing blames, but rather than focusing on, mobilizing community powers to kind of reach out to people and help them, both in a kind of in a spiritual, I guess, religious way, but also in really concrete ways, right? For example, giving them food, like we have seen in our panelist presentations today, giving out people food, or something that's really concrete and immediately, but also real services to help them deal with the passing of a family member or things like that. So what I see is more concern for dealing with the realities of COVID-19 rather than sort of focusing on the origins or pointing fingers. But that's sort of a very kind of subjective observation. I'm sure others might have other things to add.
I think that's really good. That makes a lot of sense, tagging that. And I would just say, like, I don't know how unique Buddhism is. I'm sure other religions are also, I think, Levy's looked at other religions in Japan, and so maybe he can say that, but, I don't know. I think a lot of religions are trying to give back. So it's hard for me to say, but as someone who's going to teach about Buddhism, I would try to use the kind of opening of COVID-19 to, talk about traditional Buddhism, talk about the economy of merit and how this is, can be adapted and, changed during these kind of special circumstances, showing the Buddhist teachings, like we just heard from Jeff, that some of these teachers are saying, you know, about impermanence, of course, and the nature of reality, and how Buddhists are really focused on the nature of reality and describing reality, and how COVID-19 allows Buddhists to do that. And like Amy was talking about, the modern and modern versus traditional responses, and how we can kind of see the modern Buddhist movement within COVID-19 as well. So I think that's how I kind of frame it, that you can teach a lot of the themes and aspects in a Buddhism, you know, general Buddhism class through some of the ideas from that we're seeing in the responses to COVID-19.
I think it might be really useful too to, as a demonstration of how you don't have necessarily a bunch of Buddhist discourses which are completely harmonious and fit together all the time, right? There are different opposing things that are contradictory within, you know, this big umbrella Buddhism, and that I think is sometimes hard for students in their, you know, 100 level class to really kind of get their minds around. But I mean, you know, we've seen that all the different responses that we've looked at today, but I know like in my own little example, you know, really opposing responses, like a kind of a response that really emphasizes merit sharing and the merit economy, right? And then a response which is very dismissive of that. And so I think that might be, you know, useful for the students to kind of work their way through.
Yeah, I would definitely highlight that. There's lots of opportunity here to move in counterintuitive ways, which I think is extremely useful for teaching. There are a lot of presuppositions that students tend to bring to, especially introductory level Buddhism courses. One of them will be that, you know, naturally Buddhists will seek a karmic explanation for things, or turn to sort of merit making as a response. And so, yeah, to push back against that with all kinds of complexities is a really productive pedagogical move. Yeah, thanks. It's really good.
Yeah, and I think also an interesting way to think about it is how the Buddhist precept of not killing becomes very prominent in this kind of context and pandemic. And I think one of the reasons for that is that many people attributed the cause of the pandemic to the Wuhan wet market and to the seafood market. So I think some Buddhists talk about how the idea of not killing and in fact vegetarianism is one of the ways that Buddhists can prevent, or in fact everyone can prevent such global pandemic.
All right, thank you, Pierce, for your final question there. Very useful for everyone. And I'd like to thank the participants and everyone who stayed to listen and ask your questions. And thank you so much. And please look at Pierce's chat to go to his website and share anything that you can and take advantage of those resources. So I'll end the meeting now, and everyone can leave, and I'll see you all later. It was nice to see everyone.
Thank you very much.